Welcome, Eagles fans, to the second half of your season. The Birds are feeling fresh off a bye week, and they're getting healthier and healthier, and today face a Giants team that hasn't beaten the Eagles in 8 straight, including a 22-21 victory for the Birds just 3 weeks ago. Here's your weather report from our friends at NBC 10. A little cloudy, mid-50s, some possible chance of rain later. We will have to keep an eye on it. Getting into some November football here. We're excited to have you back with us here on the Kickoff Show presented by Axalta. I'm Amy Campbell, joined as always by Fran Duffy. And Fran, it feels a little bit like deja vu here with the Giants again, but for me, this entire year is a time warp, so it fits. Look, the Eagles still in first place in the NFC East. The Giants coming off their second win. We've got the standings here, and it's all there for the taking for the Birds.
Yeah, and while this game might seem like a little bit of a deja vu since they just played 3 weeks ago, Amy, both of these teams have changed over the last couple of weeks. The Eagles are a lot healthier, which we'll talk about, and then the New York Giants, they're playing better football on both sides of the football. So I think when you look at the way that both these teams are kind of trending going into this game, it's going to be a lot different than it was in Week 7.
Yeah, really great point there. And everyone in the building here saying the bye week came at a great time. These players are excited to get back out there. So we'll send it back over to MetLife Stadium as the Eagles are warming up. As always, the warm-ups courtesy of PA Lottery. And really the story heading into this one is the health of the Eagles. Players coming back. We're going to see a lot of faces today. A lot of guys active today. For the first time this season, Alshon Jeffrey active today. Miles Sanders active today. Lane Johnson active today. Jack Driscoll, Malik Jackson. There are a lot of players that are possibly going to be on the field today. Very exciting, especially for the offense, Fran. Let's talk about that receiver group, the boost that Alshon Jeffrey will be, and how interesting it's going to be to see how this coaching staff uses him when the guys who've been playing have been pretty productive.
Yeah, I think we're all excited to see what that rotation looks like, right? With Alshon Jeffrey coming into that group with Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham and Greg Ward, John Hightower. Look, the big thing, and you mentioned all those guys coming back that are active today, but even go back to the last time the Eagles took the field. You get Jalen Reagor back in the lineup. You get Jason Peters back. You get Dallas Goedert back. So really, this Eagles team, as healthy as it's been all season long, I'm excited to see what the rotation looks like at the receiver position, though, because you look at what they've been able to do. Obviously, look, anytime you play young players, there are going to be some ebbs and flows, but overall, we've seen a lot of really good play from these guys. So I'm excited to see just what kind of impact Alshon Jeffrey can have, whether he's lined up inside or outside in the formation with this group.
All right, let's take a look at the offensive starters for the Eagles today. And we mentioned Miles Sanders back and healthy as well this week, providing a big boost to the offense. Even missing the 2 games, he still leads the Eagles in scrimmage yards with 525. He is averaging an NFL third best 87 yards per game. How big of a boost is it to have Miles Sanders back in the lineup again today?
I mean, you look at just the 2 games that he started before the injury, he had 2 70-plus yard runs in each of those games. He had the 81-yarder for a touchdown against Pittsburgh. He had the 74-yarder that was eventually fumbled and recovered in the end zone by J.J. Arcega-Whiteside against Baltimore. That was the play that he was injured on. But I think when you look at Miles Sanders, he gives you that big play potential, not just on the run game, but also in the pass game as well. And I know him and Carson Wentz, they have not really been able to hook up for any of those really big plays down the field yet through the air. But look, those guys are due. And at some point, those guys are going to hit, whether it's in a route in the flat or over the middle of the field or vertically. I would not count anything out when it comes to number 26.
All right, here's something Eagles fans are excited to see. I've got goosebumps right now seeing Alshon Jeffrey warming up in pads with the helmet on. Something we have not seen yet this season. Very exciting for this Eagles offense to continue to get stronger. And let's talk about that offensive line. 5 different offensive linemen have made NFL debuts this season. That has been a unit that has been next man up and very much in flex with the injuries there. Lane Johnson expected to be back today. Of course, Jason Peters back from that injury as well. So they're starting to get kind of those original starters back in the lineup. But now, Fran, you've got young guys who have been really productive, have gotten some good experience, especially guys like Nate Herbig, Sua Opeta, who we might see today as well. And then Jack Driscoll also active today for this offensive line.
Yeah, you mentioned Sua Opeta. He was getting the rep with Jason Kelsey there, so something certainly to keep an eye on here moving forward. I think when you look at that offensive line back in Week 7, I mean, it's a lot different, right? Because Lane Johnson was in and out of the lineup. Sua Opeta was making his first start. Nate Herbig had just moved over to the right side. He had been playing mostly on the left side in the weeks prior. Jordan Mailata had his worst start, his self-admittedly worst start as an Eagle. So I think when you look at the performance of the offensive line in that game, you got to think that it's going to be better here, knock on wood, here this afternoon up at MetLife, because you look at all the guys that have come back, how that group has gotten stronger. Lane Johnson talked this week about how he's feeling better. It's never going to be 100% this year with that ankle, but he's as good as he's going to feel. And I'm interested to see just what this group looks like, both for the run game and for the pass game, keeping Carson Wentz clean.
We were just taking a look at Alshon Jeffrey and now Travis Fulgham. They were having a conversation there. And I'm excited to see the two of them on the field together. Fulgham, who was not a household name just a few weeks ago, now everybody knows who this guy is. And he's drawn comparisons from the coaching staff to Alshon Jeffrey in the way that they're longer receivers who can go up and get the ball. So I'm just pumped to see both of them on the field at the same time and how this coaching staff uses them. All right, let's flip it to the other side. Let's take a look at the defensive starters here for the Eagles today. And, of course, Brandon Graham, he has gotten a lot of attention this week. Just some celebratory accolades. Finally, people really starting to notice the season that this guy is having. 4th in the NFL in sacks with 7. Of course, he's spoken about having a career goal of having a double-digit sack season. Well on his way to that. He is possibly playing his best football at 32 years old, putting together one of his best seasons for the Eagles.
Yeah, and when you look at the guys that are ahead of him on the sack list, I mean, it's some of the best players in the league, right? So just for him to be mentioned in that company is awesome. You look at Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt, some of the best, blue chip players in the league. And finally, great just to see BG get his due. But it's not just against the quarterback, Amy, because while he's up near the top of the list in sacks and quarterback hits, quarterback hurries, he's also up at the top of the list in TFLs, in run stops at the line of scrimmage. So I think when you look at his impact both in the pass game and in the run game, one of the most well-rounded players in this league. And it's just great to be able to see BG get those kind of accolades at this point in his career. He's been so deserving of this. I'm so glad that the production is starting to match up with the film.
An all NFL trash talker as well. One of the nicest guys there is in the league, and just one of the best trash talkers as well, which is an interesting dynamic. He's just one of a kind. Let's talk a little bit about the challenge this Eagles defense is going to have against a Giants offense that is pretty different than it was even just a few weeks ago. Through the first 5 games in the season, they had one of the worst run games in the NFL. I believe they were second to last. Now they're up into the top 15 when it comes to the run game. They've been pretty productive on the ground, which is an area that this Eagles defense historically has been great, but this season, currently they're 24th in the NFL, allowing 130 yards per game. They're going to face a Giants run game, like I said, that's been pretty productive, looking at Wayne Gallman and Alfred Morris. And those two guys were very productive against a good Washington front last week. So it's going to be a different offense than the Eagles saw just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's what New York, they want to be able to control the ball with the run game. And I think when you look at the way that they've played the last couple of weeks, it's smash mouth, power football, a lot of gap schemes where you're going to see double teams at the point of attack, pullers coming from the backside. They're going to try and get up to the linebacker level. So I'm interested to see exactly how the Eagles try and defend them today, because it's going to be a downhill scheme. The big thing is, look, the Eagles, they're 24th right now against the run, but keep in mind, that's going to factor in quarterback runs, which, the Daniel Jones had that one really long run against them a couple Thursday nights ago. Lamar Jackson certainly burned them for a few. And then also the receiver runs get factored into that as well. So while those count in the total statistics, against running backs, they've still been able to be very, very effective. And that is going to be really, really important in this game. You cannot allow New York to stay ahead of the sticks with Wayne Gallman and Alfred Morris working downhill in those power run schemes. If the Eagles can keep those two under wraps, I think that will go a long way. Force Daniel Jones to beat you with his arm. He's prone to being able to turn the football over, whether that's with fumbles in the pocket or with interceptions. The Eagles were able to do that in that game in Week 7. They'll need a repeat effort here today.
Yeah, Daniel Jones, second in the league in giveaways with 13. And you talk about his running ability. He is still the team's leading rusher with 320 yards. When your quarterback is your leading rusher, that brings up some interesting questions. But he's been a relatively efficient game manager, prone to those mistakes, like you said. But against that Washington defense, This Giants offense was very efficient. Daniel Jones managed it pretty well. For the most part, I thought made some good choices, made some of those mistakes. But what do you think the challenge is going to be for him to get today against an Eagles defense that has been prone to get to the quarterback, third in the league in sacks? We talked about Brandon Graham, but the entire Eagles defense, third in the league in sacks with 28, and Daniel Jones has also been sacked 28 times. So he's taken a little bit of a beating back there this season.
You know, that last week was the only game he did not turn the ball over, Amy, but he did put the ball on the ground twice. And so that, you know, that leaves a little bit there where you say, all right, well, if a ball bounces the other way, that stat doesn't exist. That being said, I think what he's going to see here tonight, or today, is going to be similar to what he saw back in week 7. They're going to change some things up, but ultimately, you're trying to cloud the picture for Daniel Jones. We talked about that this week on Eagles Game Plan. One of the blitzes that he really struggles with most is when all the different kinds of, they're called zone exchange blitzes, where it's essentially still a 4-man rush, but you're blitzing linebackers and safeties and corners and then dropping out defensive linemen, because when those guys drop into the passing lane, now he's got to kind of figure that out. He's got to figure out where to go with the football. There was a sack that Nate Gary had in week 7 where he comes off the edge. Fletcher Cox had dropped out into the flat, right into the passing lane. An interception that he threw to Jalen Mills, a similar kind of play. So I think when you look ultimately at the kinds of sacks or the kinds of plays, the blitzes that really impact Daniel Jones, those are the kinds I feel like he'll see today. He saw them last week against Washington and struggled. He saw them really against the Eagles back in week 7 and struggled. Those are the kinds of pressures I'll be looking for here this afternoon.
Well, and look, we're watching Carson Wentz break down some of his offensive weapons. Let's talk about the challenge for him today against a Giants defense that is, this is the strength of their team. And they forced 5 turnovers against the Washington football team last week, intercepted Alex Smith 3 times. This is a good defense, not to be overlooked. What do you think about the matchup for Carson Wentz today and the challenge that it will pose for him?
The big thing, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit earlier, they force a ton of turnovers. They're second in the league right now in forced turnovers, which you would not imagine. You know, looking at their depth chart, you wouldn't say that they have a ton of blue chip players, but their best player right now is Leonard Williams, and he was a guy that nearly wrecked the game back in week 7. He had a really good matchup against Jordan Mailata, against Nate Herbig, Isaac Seumalo, Jason Kelsey. He was able to win from multiple spots, both against the run game and the pass game. So the Eagles have to be aware of where Leonard Williams is and make sure that he does not wreck this game. And ultimately, I think when you look at this scheme, they're going to try and do a lot of different creative things up front. They're going to be tough to run against because they've got those big guys up front in the middle of that defense. But ultimately, it's going to be about diagnosing what the coverage is and then executing. And that's something we'll kind of diagram a little bit later in the show. But it is definitely a mental game for Carson Wentz in this one.
The Giants have the 4th best NFL red zone defense. Jason Kelsey earlier this week praising their defensive line, saying we need to do a better job of opening up some holes in the run game. The Giants have the 6th best rushing defense in the NFL. Also 15 takeaways. We mentioned the takeaways, 5 of those last week, but that is second in the NFL as well. Let's touch on the Eagles defense real quick. Let's talk about the matchup on the outside. Some of the weapons Daniel Jones has. We mentioned the running backs, but let's talk about some of those pass catchers. Darius Slayton, who's been really productive in his time there. Evan Ingram, who has been relatively productive, also has a tendency to drop the ball here and there, but a really good tight end. And then Sterling Shepard, when the Eagles saw him just a few weeks ago, it was his first game back from injury, so he's a bit healthier. And then Austin Mack, who is a rookie who's been really productive for them as well.
Yeah, the 2 guys are Darius Slayton and Evan Ingram. And I think when you look at Darius Slayton, he could be a game breaker, but Darius Slay did a great job for the Eagles in that matchup last time. So I would expect more of the same here in this one. To me, it's all about Evan Ingram, because the big change that I've seen in this Giants offense going from what I saw in weeks 1 through 6 up until what we saw in weeks 7 through 10 is that they are featuring Evan Ingram more, and not just in the quick game and those short intermediate routes, but also down the field vertically. I talked about that last time the Eagles faced the Giants, is that, yeah, he's got 4.3 speed as a tight end, but they didn't really use it. You didn't see him on vertical routes, on deep crossers, on wheel routes, and down the seam. You didn't necessarily see it all that often. Now they've opened it up more. He, by far, has gotten the most targets of any pass catcher in the Giants offense over the last month. So I think when you look at this Giants offense, the Eagles have to be able to contain Evan Ingram. Do not let him beat you down the seam, down the sideline. He's got the ability to do it. I know that he's had some drops, but he also has big play potential. He had some bad ones last week, came back, had a great diving touchdown reception for them in the red zone. So that's the kind of big play potential you have from an Evan Ingram.
Ooh, I just keep getting chills watching Alshon Jeffrey out there. It's really exciting to see so many of these guys back on the field. Dallas Goedert, of course, his second game back after missing time with the injury. The only player ruled out at the end of the day on Friday for the Eagles, Craig James. It has been a long time since the injury list has been that short. Doug Peterson earlier this week on getting guys back, he said, we're close. We're not there yet, but it's exciting. We haven't felt like this in a long time. It gives you a lot of hope and excitement. So we are pumped to see that today. Again, thank you to PA Lottery for the Eagles warm-ups. And now it is time to welcome in the Eagles insider, Dave Spadaro, coming to us today from the balcony of the NovaCare Complex. Dave, the players have shared the mentality of having a clean slate for the second half of the season. What makes you think they're ready to put things together and become a more consistent team after such an up and down first few games?
Yeah, Amy, I think because they're just as excited about the second half of the season starting as you and I and Fran and everybody. It's time to find out about the Philadelphia Eagles in 2020. This is a veteran team. They've been in this situation before where they've had to turn a season around. But what's interesting, this time they're doing it from the first place position in the NFC East, so that's a benefit. And then I think, look, today, having Lane Johnson back and having Miles Sanders back and Alshon Jeffrey back and Malik Jackson back, it just feels normal. Great energy at the NovaCare Complex this week, good practices. I expect the Eagles to play a very strong football game today to start the second half of this season.
Yeah, it's something you and I talked about a couple times this week in our live practice streams on the Eagles social media pages, Dave. What is your storyline going into this matchup?
I think it's the same storyline that everybody is watching. Number 11, Carson Wentz. 16 giveaways in the first half of this season. So uncharacteristic of him. How does he approach the final 8 games here? What does he do today against a Giants team that is going to bring some pressure, but for the most part, they're going to give him opportunities to be patient and to have some easy completions? What does Carson Wentz do to stay aggressive, but also to play smarter football and to have better ball security? It's something the coaching staff has hammered in. It's something that Carson has talked about all season. He has never been one to throw interceptions. This year, he's got 12 of them. Does that change in the second half of this season? Does that change starting today?
Well, and he spoke about walking that fine line earlier this week, and that's going to be something he's doing for most of his career, if not his entire career. For you, Dave, the Eagles will get the win today if they are able to do what?
If they shut down the Giants' run game, and that includes Daniel Jones, 4 straight games with 100-plus yards rushing for the New York Giants, including 160-plus yards last week against Washington. Gallman, 3 straight games with touchdowns. He and Alfred Morris do the heavy lifting. Daniel Jones is the breakaway threat. And he obviously got the Eagles back in October with that 80-yard run. So what adjustments does Jim Schwartz and this defense make? Stop the run. Force Daniel Jones to beat you. That plays into the favor of the Philadelphia Eagles defense.
Well, the Giants, through the first 5 games of the season, second worst rushing offense in the league. Now it is one of the better ones. They are putting it together. Dave, thanks so much.
All right, guys. See you after the game.
All right. All right, Fran, let's get to what you'll be looking for today. What will it take for an Eagles win?
Oh, I think one of the big things it's going to take is, we talked about it, protecting the football, right? And against this Giants defense, they are great at causing turnovers. And one of the big ways they've been able to do it is with disguise. And a great example of that goes back to last week's win over the Washington football team. And this is late in the game against a veteran quarterback in Washington's Alex Smith. And they came out in a 3-by-1 set. The Eagles do this all the time with 3-by-1 sets. And so what you see the Giants do is they come out, they're playing with their dime personnel, 6 defensive backs on the field. They are a big sub-package team, a lot of speed on the field. And it's a one-high look with Logan Ryan as a post safety. So could be cover 1, could be cover 3, but then the ball is snapped, and what happens? It's not single high. It's instead going to be a 2-high look with 2 players playing deep, and then Logan Ryan dropping into the middle hook. So he drops, and it looks like now basically a Tampa 2 defense. So it's not at all what Alex Smith saw pre-snap. So he drops back. He thinks it's one coverage. He's going to try and play one of these routes over the middle of the field, that deep in breaker over the left hash. That's where he wants to go with the football. He doesn't see Logan Ryan coming across the formation to make this play. So ultimately what this means for Carson Wentz, he has to make a pre-snap read, figure out what the defense is likely to do, then after the snap, diagnose, quickly say, hey, was this exactly what I thought it was going to be? If it's not, what are they doing? Where do I need to go with the football? Every zone coverage has a weakness, Amy. It's about trying to diagnose where to go, where to find that weakness. Carson Wentz did a great job of that late in the game in Week 7. He's going to have to do that throughout the course of this game here today.
Look, we're all emphasizing the turnover battle, the turnover differential, and for me, the part of that equation is Daniel Jones, forcing Daniel Jones to make mistakes and being able to use those opportunities to take the ball away. That is my key for this game with this Eagles defense. Daniel Jones will make mistakes if you give him that opportunity to do so. He's turned the ball over 13 times. That's second in the NFL, and he's been sacked 28 times. That's the second most in the NFL. That offensive line has struggled. They're getting a little bit healthier. They're playing a little bit better, but they haven't helped him too much. And look, the Eagles have the opportunity to throw him off his game. If they're able to do that, force him to make some mistakes, they will turn it over, and the turnover battle is really the battle here today. So if they can force Daniel Jones into some turnovers, I think that the Eagles get the win. So that is what the studio folks are watching today. Let's check in with our beloved Mike and Merrill and get their players to watch in today's game.
Thanks, Amy. The Eagles at Giants Stadium this afternoon. Mike, who is your player to watch?
Well, I'm going to stick with the hot hand. TJ Edwards was so good on this defense a couple of weeks ago. I've got to stick with him because I think if they're able to shut the Giants down in the run game, that's going to make it easy for this defense, but they've got to shut them down in the run game.
I hate to do it, but I'm going to be Captain Obvious. Carson Wentz. You have to watch Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
His turnovers were just reckless during the first half of the season. 12 interceptions and 4 fumbles. You cannot have that in this half of the season or it spells disaster. So keep your eyes on Carson Wentz. He needs to get off to a good start. Back to you, Amy.
And great stuff, as always, from Mike and Merrill. Of course, Mike watching Eagles linebacker TJ Edwards. Edwards isn't shy about the chip on his shoulder after going undrafted, but the team here thinks they got an absolute steal from Wisconsin. Edwards continues to make an impact in Philadelphia and is coming off his best game, a team-high 9 tackles against the Cowboys. He joins Mike Quick in this week's one-on-one interview presented by Ponla Hockey.
First of all, TJ, thanks for joining us. You're just coming off of the bye week. Tell me, what did you do during the bye week?
You know, it's always a good time to get away for a second and just kind of clear your mind of everything going on. So really, it was just kind of laying low and relaxing a little bit, you know, watching the tape and, you know, trying to stay mentally in the game. So then we come back this week and you really feel it, you know, guys are firing on all cylinders and things like that. But it's, you know, it's a great time to get away for a second.
So what do you, when you look at this having a break in the middle of the season, what do you think is the biggest benefit for the entire team?
I think everyone kind of gets to take a step back and, you know, evaluate themselves in terms of, you know, looking back at the past games and seeing what they could do better and how moving forward, how we can improve just in any way possible. I think it's a big time personally for guys to, you know, get their bodies back and also, you know, make sure that, you know, mentally we can kind of get a little edge going into the next week.
Gotcha. You came into the league undrafted. That never should have happened, but you were mainly a special teams guy last year. You led the team in special teams tackles. Tell me about this extended role you have now as a starter.
You know, last year, kind of like you said, it was mostly special teams, but I was able to, you know, learn a lot from the guys that were in front of me in terms of Nigel and Camus and Snake and those guys, just to see how they play the game and see their routines of how they, you know, go into each week as a starter. So I was able to take a lot of things from that and apply it to my own kind of routine. And I think, you know, just going off of last year and getting those mental reps of when I wasn't in and correlating it to this year when I'm actually out there and doing it, I think that helped me a lot. So I think learning from those veterans that were here last year really helped me a lot this year in terms of, you know, playing more defense now.
You had your best game last week. You led the team in tackles. You had a forced fumble. You had a sack. What clicked for you in that Dallas Cowboys game?
I felt just really comfortable out there. You know, I felt as a team, defensive-wise, we were just playing really firm in the run. And, you know, those big D linemen up front were, you know, taking on most of those blocks. I was able to get downhill quick and, you know, playing in the middle, you know, most of the time those runs are coming up the gap. So I was able to make some plays. And I think really we're doing a good job of being, you know, assignment sound and making sure that everyone's doing their job. And I think that's where, you know, you find success. And I think that's something we got to continue to do.
How do you enjoy a compliment like Jim Swartz saying that TJ is our best guy in terms of getting downhill, taking on those blocks of guards and getting to the football? How do you handle those type of compliments?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, it's definitely something, you know, good to hear, but you know that the work never stops and that, you know, maybe something that, you know, I'm better at, but I also have to find the stuff in my game that I'm not good at right now and make sure that I'm doing that well so I can be a better all-around linebacker. You know, I've always prided myself on being physical and being able to get downhill and things like that, but, you know, as you know, this game is changing and evolving, so I just want to make sure that I'm, you know, able to stay on the field and do whatever I can to, you know, help this defense play better.
You speak of changing and evolving. I look at the New York Giants football team, and offensively, they're doing some different things. A little more downhill running versus the perimeter running. And the running game by committee, no Saquon Barkley. What is the big challenge for you guys versus that run game of the New York Giants?
Yeah, like you said, it's a lot of downhill schemes and a bunch of different running backs who are all versatile in their own way. And then I think their quarterback, Daniel Jones, has done a good job with the zone read and making that really a weapon for them. So, it's one of those things that we have to go into this game and make sure that we contain that as much as possible to make sure that we keep them off track and get them in those backed up situations that we want to get them in.
Give me a little scouting report on those three guys.
I think Gallman and Morris are more of their downhill guys, and then you got Deion Lewis, who can really do it all in the pass game. So I think, all around they're very balanced and very talented. And then, like we said before, just adding Daniel Jones as another runner into that component really makes them, dangerous. So it's just one of those things where, again, we're going to have to be on our assignments the entire game.
Well, I can tell you this, Philadelphia likes to see points scored, but they love a solid stud in the middle of their defense. And best of luck to you up there against the Giants.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So Fran, Edwards has drawn a lot of praise from coaches specifically for his quick processing speed. He may not be the most athletic guy, but there are those guys who are just football players. And I feel like that describes Edwards pretty well.
Yeah, I think we talk about this on the Journey to the Draft podcast all the time. I mean, the difference between time speed and play speed. We talk about these guys coming out of college, and it's all about, we go to the combine, and what do they run in the 40-yard dash, and what's their three cone, and all that. But ultimately, that doesn't determine how fast a guy plays on the field, because if you look at, especially at the linebacker position, you look at a player like TJ Edwards, he is more proactive, right, than reactive. He is going to try and predict what's going to happen. All that's based off film study and understanding your opponent, and he's beating offensive linemen. He's beating running backs, tight ends to the spot. So he's playing a little bit faster than a typical linebacker would, right? So I think ultimately when you look at TJ Edwards, is he going to blow you away with his physical tools? No. But going back to his time at Wisconsin, he is always going to play fast. He's tough. He's physical. He's going to take on blocks and play through contact, and he's going to finish on ball carriers as a tackler. So ultimately, that's the big difference, I think, between time speed and play speed, kind of manifested there in the second-year linebacker.
Well, look, if he doesn't run a slow 40 at the combine, perhaps the Eagles don't have the chance to get him the way they signed him as an undrafted free agent. I know one of the first calls they made. What did you remember of him from your time scouting him before the draft, and were you surprised that he went undrafted?
I was surprised. He was a guy that was a four-year starter and was extremely productive in the Big Ten at Wisconsin. He was a tackle machine. But the big thing, too, it wasn't just tackles and downhill and in the run, but he also logged a lot of interceptions, pass breakups. He was productive against the pass as well. So while he wasn't a big-time athlete, he was really instinctive in coverage. He did a great job in zone coverage, and we saw that a little bit here this summer in training camp. He made some great interceptions down in the red zone in practice, and I think we haven't yet seen that in games, but he's got that ability. And to me, I look at TJ Edwards, I look at his skill set. It's not that different from what the Eagles had gotten over the last couple of years from Nigel Bradham. And I think ultimately, when you look at the way that he can play in this scheme, and ultimately that's a very easy comparison to make and say, look, if Nigel Bradham did this over the 2016, 2017, 2018 seasons, why can't TJ Edwards do that in 2020, 2021, 2022? I think you can definitely make that comparison.
Well, look, he's got an exciting matchup today against an evolving Giants run game as well, so it'll be a fun one to watch. All right, we are going to take a quick break here on the Kickoff Show. On the other side, we will wrap this thing up with our final thoughts on the Eagles-Giants. Stay with us. The Philadelphia Eagles and Axalta Coding Systems are building a roster of all-pro teachers. Go to philadelphiaeagles.com/Axalta All-Pro Teachers to view this year's list of outstanding recipients. Here's the Eagles quarterback warming up for another battle against an NFC East opponent. Plenty on the line today, this afternoon. And this guy, best game of his career last year at MetLife Stadium. 3 touchdowns last time he was in that building. I'm sure it's exciting to be back in the place where it all happened. Looking forward to a good game from Boston Scott today. All right, this is your 15-minute warning. It is 15 minutes to kickoff, and that means a little something special here on the Kickoff Show. Fran?
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes. That means you have 15 minutes to go save 15% or more on your car insurance by switching to Geico.
All right, we love it. We love it. All right, we've got an exciting NFC East battle on tap, and you know where to be as soon as it ends. Right back here for the postgame show presented by Rico. Ike Reese joins Fran and myself for instant analysis, and as always, we will hear from coach and players live, so be sure to tune in. For now, we've got a game to watch, the Eagles and the Giants. We will see you on the other side.